Hello, hello. Welcome to today's Money Monday with Purse Strings. My name is Maggie, and I'm a partner here at Purse Strings. We're all about providing tips, tricks, pieces of advice about how to be financially fearless. Then, when you're ready to go buy a house, you're getting divorced, just planning for retirement, you need a will, all these different things, we have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to serve you. We call those our Purse Strings approved professionals, and Tami Wollensak is one of them. We're so excited to have her on today to talk about how alimony and child support can really affect a mortgage. But before we dive into all that fun, Tami, could you give us a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thanks so much, Maggie, for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation. Tami Wollensak, and I am a certified divorce lending professional, and that means that I have background knowledge and training in divorce, and I also happen to be able to do a mortgage. So I've been a mortgage lender and in the mortgage business for the past, I hate to even say it out loud, it might be older than you, Maggie, 28 plus years. But it's always fun to have a lot of different aspects and facets of the mortgage business and really found a true passion with helping divorcing clients making better informed decisions regarding their marital home. So that's really what I do.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you on today. And I know you're in Illinois, but you can serve outside of Illinois too for anyone who's listening, correct?
Absolutely. I can lend in 46 of the 50 states. So it'd be easier for me to say the states I cannot, which is Alabama, Alaska, Hawaii, and New York. I do not lend in those states, but I do have colleagues and other professionals that can help. And I'm always more than willing to have a conversation and refer if necessary.
Awesome. Well, if anyone's tuning in today and has any questions, happy to throw those in the chat and we're happy to get back to you on those. If you're watching the replay, put them in the chat and we'll come back to those. But let's kind of dive into, alimony and child support and a mortgage. And so when you're getting divorced, the house is always a huge asset to either to keep the home, to, refinance it, to sell the home. And alimony and child support play a big part in kind of that income bucket. So, first of all, how do you kind of start a process with a couple? Do you start with just them telling you, I want to keep or buy the house, and you do that? Or do you start with an analysis? How does that kind of start off?
Well, a lot of times I'm referred by the divorce team. So sometimes I'm working with both spouses, and sometimes I'm just working with one of the spouses that really wants the information to decide whether or not they want to keep their marital home. It's very important that you take this step because you don't want to sign a settlement agreement and ink the bottom line of something that you can't carry out. That's really the most important thing. And when it comes to alimony, child support, maintenance, we call it in some states, and then those type of income streams need to meet stability and consistency tests. And that's where a lot of times your attorney might not understand, well, they're not a mortgage lender, so they might not be clear on what needs to happen. A lot of times I get settlement agreements that say, spouse A is to refinance the house within 90 days. Well, in order to use an income stream that we just discussed, a lot of times it has to be received from the other spouse as ordered for 6 months. Oh. So if you're being ordered to refinance the home in 90 days, and that's a big portion or all of your income, we're going to have a problem. So meeting with a certified divorce lending professional and giving you all of the options and timelines that need to be met is really important.
It's so interesting because a lot of times, we say the attorneys, they know the law, but they don't know the nuances of getting a mortgage. And so not all of these things they really know about when writing the divorce decree. And that's where your specialty really comes in.
Right.
And so what are some of those, consistencies we're looking for in either the child support or alimony to help or allow it to go towards the mortgage?
Yeah, so that's a really important, so 2 buckets, right? We're looking at if there's support income being alimony, or sometimes it's called maintenance, or child support. So it needs to be received in general for 6 months. That timeline can sometimes start depending on if there's a court, or there might be a temporary order or an order in place that's your spouse is being ordered to pay you a certain amount. Excuse me. And if that is the case, then I can use that to start the timeline or the clock ticking, so to speak. And then there has to be a continuance. And typically that's 3 years or 36 months. So we call it the 636 rule. Receive for 6 months and at least have a 36 months continuance. So in order to use it at all, it has to meet those requirements. Well, when there's child support involved, maybe your children are, let's say, 14 and 12, and you're only going to be receiving child support until the children turn 18. Well, in that particular case, 14 and 12, you typically will receive it for another 4 years. But what happens if your child is 16 and you're only going to be receiving it for 2 more years? Then, unless it's spelled out specifically as to the dollar amount, you have 2 children, a lot of times the attorney lumps in the child support just into one number. Well, we don't know in the mortgage world what that is going to look like once that older child turns 18. So we just cut it in half, and give you 50%. Well, that might not be the case. Maybe you're really going to be receiving 75% once the older child turns 18. So it's really important that we're clear, that the attorney's clear, that things are spelled out so that you can maximize and get the most amount of money in your settlement agreement to qualify for a mortgage.
Right. Interesting. And so, yeah, you can't just always split that number right in half, but you don't know what the future is going to hold. Right. And we always say, there's always the amount that the bank lends you, but there's also the part that fits into your budget. They might offer you more than really fits into your budget. And so if you did estimate, let's say on 75% of that, and you only got 50, that could really impact your, your budget and your savings and different things like that. So there's a ton of moving parts.
Right. There's a lot of moving parts. And if you're trying to keep the marital home, or you're trying to go out and buy a new home, now you've signed the settlement agreement, you've inked everything up, thinking that you're going to, go into the next phase of your life in a certain manner. And then I'm here to tell you, guess what? I can only use this, that, or the other thing. Then I'm the bad guy, right? So it's always best that I review a lot of drafts and a lot of settlement agreements and help people come up with income streams. A lot of times I'm seeing now where maintenance is being bought out in a lump sum. Well, you have a big bank account, like you're getting a big chunk of money, but guess what? Sometimes you don't have an income stream. We look at an income stream. So I can help come up with solutions for that, and the ability to create an income stream with a lump sum distribution. So all those things really come into play, especially when we're talking about something as emotional and large as somebody's home. Their marital home, or where they're going to live, their stability, their safety is all involved with housing. So something that a really important piece of the pie.
It definitely is. Everyone wants to make sure they have a roof over their head, and that's not questioned for them or their children.
Right.
But they might, want to get out of who else is under that roof.
Right.
And so you were kind of mentioning that you read over some of these divorce decrees before they're signed to make sure that it kind of aligns to whatever the future goals will be.
Right. The guidelines, though, in the mortgage world are pretty specific. So sometimes, the attorney might mean well, but sometimes the language that's put in the settlement agreement doesn't align with mortgage guidelines. And so we have to be very specific sometimes so that I can utilize or not utilize, maybe when it comes to debts or liabilities, if there's going to be any contingent liabilities, what we call contingent liabilities, meaning you're not going to be responsible for certain debts that you have, maybe your spouse is going to be, and we're going to need to eliminate that debt in order for you to qualify. that needs to be spelled out in the settlement agreement, and it needs to be specific so that when my underwriters look at it, they're very clear on what you are responsible for and what you're not responsible for.
That's a great point, because a lot of times when buying a home, I think about like the income that you need and that consistent income, but it could also be the debt that you carry together as a couple and how that affects you as well. So
Right.
there are both, the income, but also the debt that you're carrying.
Right. A big thing that I see a lot is, if you're both on a mortgage loan, there's a big misnomer out there that if you're on a mortgage, you can't go out and buy another house because you'd have to qualify with both debts.
Mm,
Well, you could conceivably be still liable on the other debt from the mortgage lender perspective, but I wouldn't have to count it against you if you're going out and buying a new home if it's spelled out in a certain way within your settlement agreement, so that I can eliminate that other mortgage payment and allow you to qualify if it's spelled out and is spelled out properly.
interesting, interesting. And so I guess there's also then needs to be some specific verbiage if you wanted to stay in the house but need to refinance it to your own name.
Right. Yeah. If you want to refinance it, sometimes you need a longer period of time, right? Especially if you're going to be receiving any maintenance or alimony or child support, then you need it longer than 90 days, because you have to receive that money for at least 6 months before I can use it as part of your income stream. So putting something in a settlement agreement that says you're going to refinance within 90 days, it's going to kill mortgage financing for you. Because I need to at least have seen 6 months of receipt of that.
Do you find that sometimes the home slows down the divorce process because of some of these things, or do you find that you just need to get in at the right time and start having these conversations?
Well, I think that it does. It's sometimes a couple's biggest asset, and they're not really clear on how it needs to be divided and what all the parameters around how it needs to be divided work. And if I can come in really at the beginning of the process and help them come up with all of their options. I'm not here to decide for you what's best for you and your family, but at least I can give you what the options are and spell it out in black and white terms, right? As a financial decision, not as an emotional decision. And a lot of times people come to me and say, I want to keep the marital house. And then when I, crunch the numbers and show them exactly what that looks like, sometimes they're like, oh, that's not really what I want to do at all. Maybe I
Right.
really do want to sell the house and take my portion of the equity and maybe buy a smaller home or do something different, or have another option that's not going to be so taxing on their budget post-divorce, which I think is really important. You mentioned budgets earlier, and that's a really big piece of the puzzle, is not just getting to the settlement agreement and signing it,
Right.
is coming up with a budget and an options for you that's going to make the most sense for you and not be completely stressful, that you're going to have to make this big mortgage payment every month, that you really weren't clear on what that looked like.
And we see, once you dive into it, it's more than the mortgage payment. It's the upkeep of the house, it's the shoveling, the landscape, all these different things. I know when I was living with my mom and she got divorced, we're like, none of us want to shovel, none of us want to do the upkeep.
Right.
None of us really know how to manage a broken furnace if that were to happen. Like, let's make that someone else's problem, because that's not something we had the time or really the money for, and something that we wanted to invest in. And
Completely agree. I think that's another big piece. It's not just the mortgage. And that was something that happened to me post-divorce that I wasn't really clear on. Now this other person is gone that might have taken care of some of those things as a family, there's a division of duties, so to speak, when you're married. And sometimes that other person took care of that, did the landscaping, did the snow removal, did all the things. And now all of a sudden that person is no longer there, and you're either going to have to figure out how to do it yourself or pay somebody to do it. Well, it's expensive. So that was very taxing on my budget. And when I realized that, oh my gosh, spring cleanup, fall cleanup, doing the furnaces, the gutters, all the things, I was completely overwhelmed and realized that was a really bad decision for me. And I really needed to sell the marital home.
And, sometimes it is like that. You take some time and you learn, and that's kind of how it goes. And then you go and get it, you do it again, get another mortgage or refinance or whatever that may be. But we always, talk about how you can't take money out of the window if you need it. So if your house has all the money, that's not always the best option.
100%. And the other thing that I don't think people take into consideration is the cost of selling a home. If you signed an agreement saying you're going to keep the home and then you end up, let's say, not being able to refinance the home and there's a sale involved, now all of a sudden you own a home yourself and all the costs of the sale sometimes can be 100% on you. So you have to take that. You might have paid out your spouse in a different way with other assets and not necessarily the home. And now you gave up something to keep a house. Now you have to take into consideration there's costs involved with selling. So you're really not netting out as much as you might have considered or thought through. And, in Illinois and across the country, I usually tell people it's around 8%. 8% of the sales price is approximately what it costs to sell a home. And that includes, right, your realtor fees and that type of thing, any taxes in the area, transfer taxes, that type of thing. So if you take, if you didn't take that number into consideration, it could be a large number that you're having to give up.
And I could see how overwhelming managing all of this could be and like why you would need all these professionals. Because that's, again, something I would never think about and calculate 8% and how does that fall into it, all these different things. So having someone who can lay these numbers out for you and help you see, compare apples to apples and really see what's going on is super helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any like pieces of information around alimony or child support that you see consistently come up that are usually an issue or something that you want to make sure is shared?
Just that there's enough time. Like if you're really, truly going to be utilizing that money to qualify for something, making sure that their length of time is available. It's usually a timing issue. So you have to have received it for 6 months and you have to have a 3-year continuance. Both of those things need to happen post the closing of the loan. So let's say you're only getting it for 48 months, right? And then you wait a year. And then, so it's all about timing in those cases so that you have both of those things need to happen in order for me to be able to use it as what we call qualified income.
Yeah, that's so important to know because I could see, let's say if you got it for 36 months, and you only needed 6 more months to qualify. And so, how else can we arrange this divorce decree to make that equal so I could get my own home?
Right. Or buy out your spouse. Sometimes, your spouse is waiting for some money out of that too. So sometimes if I mention that as they're coming up with their agreements, then the spouse is more than helpful to say, okay, look, I'll be able to do that for an extra 6 months in order to get my money out of the marital home. It makes sense to do. But if you didn't have the options and weren't able to propose the solution, then it might not happen.
Yeah, you really got to understand the why. It's not just because I want 6 more months of income,
right.
But what that leads me or allows me to do.
Right. That's very
awesome. Is there anything else? I feel like we've touched on a ton of great information today. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure we share?
No, just, having all the options helps make a better informed decision, and don't be afraid. I think it's really important. This is something that people don't understand is I'm a mortgage lender. And so what that means to people is I cannot charge for my services. So there's no downside to calling me and asking me for information. The reason I cannot is because it's against the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. If I charged a divorcing client to give them all the information and then I didn't charge a first-time home buyer if they were coming to me to crunch numbers, then that could be considered disparate treatment. So, it's free to call me and to run things by me. I can put together a divorce mortgage plan for people very easily. And really, there's no downside. So if you have a marital home involved in your settlement, and you're really looking to come up with the options or solutions, like I said, there's no downside to it.
Yeah, you got to bring a CDLP into the equation because it's just going to make it better.
Right.
And so, yeah, we always say, don't be afraid to introduce your professionals to each other, discuss, with everyone what your end goal is, what you hope to get out of it and how this person can help you, because they're all on your team. It's not like they're against each other for your business, but they're all there to help you and support you through this process.
We all come with a very different perspective. I work a lot of times with CDFAs as in the financial piece and the division of assets. I work a lot of times with the mediator or the family law attorney. So we're really all trying to come up with solutions from our lane of advice.
Which I love. That way everyone's out there for your best interest, which can't complain about there.
Right.
So thank you, Tami, for coming on and providing your expertise. Tami's email has been going through the bottom down here. She's also, let's see, now on TikTok. She's on Instagram. Do you know your handles there?
You know what? If you go to my website, which is takeorleavethehouse.com, you can schedule an appointment with me. All my social media sites are listed there. They're all Tami Wollensak, CDLP. Much harder to spell than takeorleavethehouse.com.
I love that. That's so cute. Takeorleavethehouse.com. I love that. Well, yes, don't be afraid to reach out to Tami, reach out to any other CDLP we have on our site. They are so happy to help you and help you get through this process. So give them a call. Let's get this process started. We know time is of the essence usually. So thank you again, Tami, and we'll see everyone again here next week.
Thanks so much, Maggie. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. Bye-bye.